Like, how do I know my child is ready for Simply K?
I don't want to apply stress and pressure to my 5-year-old because everybody else's kid who goes to public school is reading. The best thing that those children can be doing is getting language development from interaction with others, is being read to. Reading books to children alone increases vocabulary, it helps critical thinking skills, it helps language development, it helps them understand consequences, cause and effect. I mean, so
Right.
it's also a gentle introduction to math vocabulary
Yes.
and just that language and getting their brains warmed up to think mathematically.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic start to your week. I am here with author Carrie Bailey again this week. Last week we were talking about stepping stones. This week I wanted to take it a little bit farther and talk about kindergarten and Simply K and Math K. And last week we kind of got going and was just kind of in the middle of it, and everything crashed and it was kind of hard to regain and get everything back. So I just want to go over a little more. And talk about it. Before I start, there is a special little follower that we have. She belongs to Rick and Anna Walter. Her name is Ellie, and I understand she always says hello to me on the screen when I broadcast, and she actually sent, excuse me, a very cute little song today. And so I would just like to say, hi, Ellie. I'm glad that you're watching, and thank you for singing for me today. That was awesome. So, okay. So, Carrie, your background, you taught in a public school.
Yes.
In kindergarten, right? A kindergarten setting. So you had that background. How long did you teach?
4 years.
Okay.
I think.
And did you also then do special needs? Was that?
Yeah. So I had a year of that. That was actually self-contained 6th, 7th, and 8th grades.
Okay. So then you came into Master Books. How did you find out about Master Books? Other than my brilliant marketing, like how did you?
So when I pulled my son from public school in 2016, I started looking for ways to be able to teach him. And one of the things that I really wanted to do was use the Bible in our homeschool. Obviously, you can't do that in a public school setting. And I knew that I wanted that as the core. And I just started thinking, I was like, back in the day, they didn't have other books that were their core. The Bible was the core for their grammar, all of their language. And so that's how I found it's Illustrated Family Bible Stories.
Yep.
What is that course? Now I can't even think of the name of the course. It's no longer being printed.
Wasn't that the sixth? Was that the 6th grade Bible and elementary grammar?
Elementary Bible and English grammar. Yes. That's it.
Yes.
So that's how I found you. And then I had actually started with a different program, and the math that they were using, I just didn't like it. It was just a lot, and a lot of fluff. And then there was this huge teacher's guide that honestly, I was like, I don't even need that. Why did I even get that? And it just wasn't very engaging for my child. That actually was my middle son who had just started kindergarten. And then I happened to find, I was like, well, I liked this. And so I kind of browsed your website, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think you guys you didn't have the selection of things now that you do now. But you had math lessons for living education. And so I got him level 1, and we did really good up until place value. And then that was just a little bit too abstract. And there were some other things that I had started listening to veteran homeschool moms.
Okay.
And they're saying boys are, usually it's better if you wait. And so he was actually a younger, as a matter of fact, when I had him, I told my husband, I don't want to send him to kindergarten the year that he should start because he has an April birthday. And I knew from being a teacher, those kids, especially young boys, they're just not ready. And it would have been better to wait. And so I just paused his learning and waited until he was almost 6 and then came back to it, and he did great.
Yeah. Well, you came into the Moms of Master Books group and didn't take you very long, and you were answering questions and trying to help people find resources. So if somebody had a question, you were posting links and encouraging moms, and you became a valued member of the community. And then I asked you if you would be willing to come on as a moderator, and you apprehensively agreed to that. Again, I had to sell that.
That's not true. I was honored. I was like actually shocked, and I was scared when I got a message from you that said you wanted to talk to me, because I was like, oh my goodness, what did I do? And that's just, it was like you were Randy Pratt and you were calling me or sending me a message for me to call you. And the problem is that I have my Facebook settings where I don't have any friends at all. So you couldn't even try to, like, y'all couldn't even add me, I don't think, to the group or something like that.
Yeah.
Really fun.
Yeah. Well, it's always funny. You know, managing groups isn't easy. If anybody who wants to do a Facebook group, the water's warm. My mentor always used to say, come on in, the water's warm, you know, which means basically you're welcome to try it if you think it's going to be that much fun. And so you joined that journey. And then along the way, we asked you if you would be willing to write a developmental approach to kindergarten. Developmental is key. That's a key word there. We talked about it a little bit last week, but if we could talk about it just briefly again. When we say developmental program, what does that mean to you?
To me, it means that we are meeting the entire child where they are in their development, whether that be, you know, working with more fine motor concepts, gross motor concepts, because the child, just think about when you go to your pediatrician, or maybe you don't, but when you go there and they do that well child checkup and they start asking you, you know, different questions for that age, and, you know, at a year old, can they say, you know, how many words can they say? And there's a target for that range. And of course, they're going to have some that fall above and some that fall below that. But then there are other things that they take into consideration, like they will see if the child can, you know, pick up a pencil, or, you know, can they hop? There's different things like that you also look at that have nothing to do with like the academic side of it, but they have to do with the development of the whole child. And so that's kind of what this is as well. It's more than academics. Last week I had the funnel where I showed you an academic approach is basically more narrowed, where we want our funnel to have that wider section where we are meeting the entire thing, and we're actually getting more information and more things in for the child, so they can grow in every area, not just in one area.
Yeah.
A lot of times people, they mistake academics for intellect, and I keep saying, I say it a lot, especially like in the group, and when I speak, because I'm like, okay, it has nothing to do, like academic success doesn't really have to do with intellect. Yes, some of it comes from intellect, but a whole lot of it comes from if they're ready, if that child is ready developmentally. Yeah.
Before I go, I just want to say I'm trying to keep an eye on questions that come in. So if you have any questions for Carrie or I, we'll kind of ask us anything. We're happy to try to touch base on them. One of the things I think, you know, we always have to remind ourselves of the platform that we're dealing with, right? So when you're dealing with any kind of school, their mission statement typically isn't the whole child. They're very one-dimensional in that they're looking to give a student an academic excellence in academics, not necessarily academics in all the other fields. We just, you know, maybe there's some extracurricular or some humanities type things that they do, but the difference between homeschooling is that we as parents are interested in the whole child. I want to make sure not only that they can add 2 + 2 when they go to the hardware store, but I also want to make sure that they treat the cashier with respect, that they can conduct themselves with integrity and can share the gospel, and that they, you know, that they can actually walk into the store without tripping and sign their names without looking, you know, completely silly. All of these things we're looking at. We want them to succeed in life, not just passing an exam to go to college or to have a job, that type of thing. So developmental starts out very early. Early childhood development, like you had said, there's certain benchmarks.
Yes.
So in the benchmarks, like those are types of things that we would look for. Explain for you, I've explained it a little bit in the past with the brain development and how if we push too early, we can actually cause problems with the way the brain grows and develops. And we can actually create anxiety and stress hormones that now every time we approach learning, the brain responds to that stimulus. It's a trigger that the brain responds to and can actually produce problems down the road. When I say early childhood development to you, or brain development, like how would you summarize that? I just threw you like
Yeah.
a big one.
So how would I summarize brain development?
Yeah, especially when we're talking about kindergartens. Like why, both you and I think we share kind of a passion here. We see a lot of families want to get their kids into it. And it's like me wanting my 10-year-old to drive a car. Yeah, that would be great, but they're not developmentally ready for it. They're not big enough. They're not intelligent enough. They don't have the decision-making skills, the problem-solving skills to drive a car. Well, sometimes with kindergarten, it's the same approach. Like a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 6-year-old, those are lifetimes.
Huge difference.
And well, not every child is created equal, and it's okay for a student to actually go into kindergarten at 6, maybe even 7. That's not, I've shared a number of times about Finland. Their program doesn't start till 7. Now they're very intentional up to age 7. They're reading and playing and a lot of imagination and skill development, but it's not the academic push that the American culture has. And so brain development from that standpoint, 4, 5, and 6, when we're talking about kindergartens, what would you say to a mom? What do we need to kind of keep in mind? Is that a better question?
The first thing is, yes. The first thing is that there is so much that we don't realize that we have been, and I hate to use the word indoctrination, but that's the truth. Like we have been indoctrinated to believe that our child needs to be reading in kindergarten and that our child needs to be able to add and subtract in kindergarten. And I actually saw a comment yesterday, and please do not be offended at what I'm about to say, and I hope that it comes out in the way that I mean it. But I had said something to someone of, well, my goal for young, early childhood is not, pushing academics really early on. And so I realized that my goal was different than the person that I was speaking with. And just because that is my goal doesn't mean that they have to adapt my goal and take that and say, okay, well, that's my goal now too. I'm trying to tell you what, as far as research goes, as well as studies go, what is the best approach. And that's kind of how I feel about it. I feel like this is the best approach. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written what I did. I wouldn't, be speaking about this is the best approach. But we talk about best practices in education, and unfortunately, the school system's hands are tied. A lot of times, the teachers who are teaching, they don't agree with all of that. But the best practices, it's really not up to them. They are given what they have to teach. So let me just preface with that. But then another person came in behind after I had said something about, that your approach may not be the same as mine. Here's how you can take this and use this your own way. And then it was funny because someone came in and said that they thought that Simply K was more of a pre-K, like 3, maybe 4-year-old, and that Stepping Stones was more of a 2 to 3-year-old curriculum. Well, first of all, I don't do curriculum with the 2 and 3-year-old, and I'm not knocking those who do, but I feel like, and I know that research stands behind, the best thing that those children can be doing is getting language development from interaction with others, is being read to. Reading books to children alone increases vocabulary, it helps critical thinking skills, it helps language development, it helps them understand consequences, cause and effect. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And just like yesterday afternoon, I was sitting at the island and my children are playing in the floor, and mine just turned 5, my youngest just turned 5 in March. And the things that he was coming to me and saying and learning and asking me again, Mom, they were playing with animals. So Mom, what does the okapi eat again? And making sure he knew the okapi and the ostrich, okay, can we put them in a cage together? Do they eat the same things? And all of that was through play. And it was through them questioning and them asking. And, I'm being honest, I don't feel the pressure anymore from the public school system to conform to what they have said is the standard. I now know that their standard isn't what's best. And people will disagree with me, and that's okay. I'm not here to try to cause controversy. I'm here to try to tell you, if we're looking at the entire child, this is what's best. This is what's appropriate for them.
Right. Yeah, I think with Master Books, we didn't really, we believed a little bit more along the lines of you don't need to push a child too early. And so we started the Foundation Phonics in first grade. And then you'll see as you get to high school, people will be like, well, now it's, it gets pretty challenging by the time you get up into the 8th, 9th grade. But it's because we start out just a little bit gentler in the beginning. But I mean, most of our books all still follow the traditional scope and sequences of other publishers. It's just we try to limit the attention span and all of that's available to a student.
Some states don't even require kindergarten still.
Right.
There are some states that don't even, like kindergarten, like my dad's like, I never had kindergarten. He was in Ohio as a little boy, and he didn't have kindergarten. I believe New York doesn't even start until first grade.
They do have a kindergarten. They used to have a half day, and then I think they've kind of changed it, but it wasn't optional. You didn't necessarily have to do it, until they turned 6.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, we see the studies. There's a number of studies that actually support being aware anyways. And that doesn't mean that every student needs to be 6 or 7 to start school. That just means to have an awareness as a parent, not to panic if your 5-year-old or 6-year-old don't act ready. That's okay. Because all of a sudden, like overnight sometimes, they'll just come to you and say, hey, I'm interested in learning, right? And then you just go. And when at that moment, like they let you know when they're ready for it.
Well, and like I know that this was from last week, but one of the things I even talked about last week was my son, who's now 13. And in probably the last 2 years or so, I have seen a huge growth in connection with him with math. Now, some of that is because he had some math anxiety from being in public school and just the way that things were. You have to teach the concept and move on, whether you got it or not, and whether it was explained or not. You just have to keep going because that's how that system is. And so it did take some time to get rid of that anxiety, but then just how things have like clicked for him. And when I was talking with our psychiatrist, that's one of the things that he even said was, in his own family, his sister did the same thing. Like she didn't even read until she was like 8 or 9 years old. And it's just one day it clicked and boom. And she's a successful woman now, And so I think sometimes we've put pressure on ourselves that's not necessary. And then when I'm stressed or putting pressure on me, then it causes stress on me. And then that's going to flow over onto my child. And, it's like with anything. And I don't want to, this may not be the best analogy, but think of a child that has had an abusive type relationship or something happened to them when they were younger and how that affects them as they were older. And it's kind of the same situation when they have a high stress, something that happens. It takes time to be able to heal from that to deal with that and uncover all of that. And so my thing is, I don't want to apply stress and pressure to my 5-year-old because everybody else's kid who goes to public school is reading.
Right.
And so I have to own what I believe. And it's okay if everyone else doesn't agree with me. That's fine. It's kind of like, well, this is how I believe, and just because the world doesn't believe the way that I do and is a Christian, it doesn't mean that I have to have a big fight about it. It's just say, well, that's great for you, and just smile and move on.
Right. Yep. I bless you in your journey. I'm not your type of peach. Obviously, you're an apple person. It's okay. That giving people permission to not like me, it sometimes has been it's good for both people.
Yeah.
I'm not likable to everybody. I know that. I don't like everybody either. So there's going to be that option. I think something that you said, and I know that this puts a lot of pressure on a mom and a dad, but I do think that we need to be aware of it. Those ages, early childhood development is so crucial. And sometimes it's so hard because we're so stressed out. We're living life. We're still trying to figure out how to be married. We're dealing with financial issues. Early childhood development is just a tough age for parents. But we get what we lead. And the way we approach things, when it comes to learning math or learning reading, if we get frustrated, if we get overwhelmed, if we get angry, whatever emotions we have, we're imprinting that emotion with that topic to that student. So when my oldest would come home from first grade and she would be frustrated because she wasn't getting a concept, and I was at the end of the day and I was already frustrated that I had to sit at the table and it was my responsibility to teach her this, and so I'm getting angry at her, but then I want her to have this beautiful angelic attitude every time we come to the topic of math, but I taught her not to because my attitude was so poor.
Right.
And even with mistakes, the way I would approach, if she made a mistake, I was just getting frustrated. Why can't you get this? Well, all I was doing was imprinting frustration and a bad attitude with the subject. And so we have to be aware that the facial expressions, because our mirror neurons, God wired us incredible, and young children are watching us for everything. My kids make the same expressions. They behave the same way. My brother and I, people will say who haven't seen us together in a long time, will say, wow, you guys, you're like mirror images. And it's not like we're together that much. It's just, right. We grew up in the same atmosphere, and our brains, input program runs a certain way. So just as a caution, when we come to subjects like that, do our best to stay as emotionally healthy as we want our students to be. Right?
Absolutely.
Because that's a big part of learning, is watching, okay, what is my teacher responding to here? And if you've gone to public school or you've gone to a private school, or maybe even your own parents, you're going to know, as I'm talking about it, there's a teacher in your life that thought you were stupid, that carried forward that everybody else in class seems to get it, but you're the one that just can't seem to figure life out. Those imprints, that pain, it's so strong in my brain because it's a painful thing, cortisol dumps, all of these things that make the brain work. And they may even be affecting you in your homeschool. As you go to teach your children, you may still have that 5th or 4th grade teacher that made you feel less than, you're just not bright enough, right? All these other knives are sharp and you're the one that we have to keep getting the sharpener out for. That aspect is, you almost have to reprogram yourself and be aware of it to do that. Maybe we'll talk about that in the teaching tip.
Yeah, I actually have experienced some of that my own self. I had a brother who's just super, everything came easy to him. And I had to work my tail off to get my A's and B's, where he could just not even do anything, or, because he could talk to the teacher a certain way, sometimes they would kind of sway and, maybe give him a little bit of a better grade or something. He could sell himself. That's not my personality at all. And I actually felt stupid a lot of my life, and until probably after I started homeschooling, I realized, hey, I'm actually a little bit good at this. And I've been shocked, and I know that y'all are gonna be like, what in the world? But seriously, I've been shocked, and I'm like, oh, I actually might be good at this. And then I've discovered it's just because I think differently than the mainstream. And I remember my dad saying things like that when he was younger too. He felt different than the rest of his family because he didn't think the same way. And I think sometimes when we are what I call, like, or you call, an out of the box thinker, and we don't go with societal norms, then it causes us to make us feel like, we are the ones that are awkward or weird or stupid or whatever. And,
Yes.
I tell my children all the time, they're all three different. They all have gifts and abilities, and some of us are stronger in an area than another. And my goal is to help them and recognize their strengths and build on that.
Yes.
And if I'm weak in an area, someone else may be strong in that area. And I use that. I'll even say, instead of saying that someone is, not getting something, a lot of times I'll use the phrasing to my children, well, hold on, let so and so look at this because they think differently than I do. And they may see this in a different way, to be able to explain it to where someone else can understand it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Somebody said a teaching tip on reprogramming the brain, because I know what I said there can cause a lot of shame, and it's not intended to. Awareness helps us grow. And the culture that we have here, like, I agree, if you guys all agree, it's room for growth. There isn't one of us who's perfect. We're all growing, and we will be until the day we pass into glory. But one of the best things we can do when that moment comes and we're frustrated and maybe we just made a mistake and set the wrong message to our kids is just say, whoa, you know what? I just made a mistake in doing that, because math is fun, and I'm frustrated about the fact that your dad didn't take out the garbage. I'm not frustrated about math. And kind of put the connection with the brain that it's not them. This isn't what's approaching math. It's because I need to get my attitude in check to do this, and just help them be aware of those facts too, because we tend to go through life on what's it called, when you put the cruise control. We put the life on cruise control, and we're not aware of things. And when you kind of step back and have an awareness, like this week something triggered me and all kinds of bitterness and bad emotions were coming out, and I'm just like, what is this? Why is this happening? So rather than responding in a bad brain spot, actually trying to figure out what just happened that triggered these emotions that typically would hurt those around me, as opposed to owning it and working through it. And with our education, our kids will trigger us. They will. And it's important to try to understand, why is this triggering me? What's happening here? And of course, that's a whole teaching tip, and I'm way off. So, all right, I'm gonna bring it back over. Simply K. This course is meant to be done how many days a week?
It is 3 days a week as scheduled. There are some optional extended activities if they want to do more. And then, so one of the questions, because we have Simply K as scheduled 3 days a week, and then we have Math K as scheduled for 5 days a week.
Yes.
So here's what basically is going on with that. So we realized that in the math, all of the other courses had 5 days a week. So we wanted to keep the consistency of that program. And then we know that the core of the exercises are in days 1 through 3. So someone was asking about scheduling with this. So here's what I would do if I were using them side by side. I would do Simply K on days 1 through 3, whatever you choose that to be. It can be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever you choose. And then I would definitely do the first 3 days of each lesson for Math K. If you want your kindergarten or need it to be 5 days a week, then the other thing would be use Simply K and either use extended activities on days 4 and 5. Just only do like your ABC chart, your practice writing. I've seen a lot of people saying things about the writing, like not being enough practice. But I think what's happening, and maybe we can try to make it more clear, is there in the ABCs and more section, there are times that it will say, practice writing these letters. Well, I don't know, can you see this?
Yep.
Is it coming?
Sort of. There you go.
There we go. Okay, so this is in the back of the book, and it is front and back. It has capital letters on one side and lowercase on the other. You can put that in a plastic sleeve or laminate that. That is where they're supposed to be getting their extra writing practice. In this course, I did not put them in writing without tracer lines or without tracers of the letters.
Okay.
Because developmentally, I felt like they still need that guide. So practice writing, do the ABC chart, review your rhyme, and even the life skills. Continue that through days 4 and 5 of the week. And then you can also practice your memory verse. That's what I would do if I were trying to make Simply K 5 days a week.
Okay, so going into Simply K, what does a student, like, how do I know my child is ready for Simply K?
So if they can sit and give focused attention for about 4 to 5 minutes, if they want to learn and are asking to learn things, if they have fine motor control to be able to trace a dotted line, I'm trying to think what else. Really, honestly, if they have that and they're able to at least focus for 5 minutes, I think that they can do it.
If not, then maybe start with stepping stones.
Yes.
And I think it's important again to note that we're not looking at the rigor of the academics, because there are things in there like tracing or just memory skills that are developing different parts of the brain. It's not about the rigor of the academics at this point.
Right. Rigor is like one of those words that it almost makes me laugh every time I see it. And I don't mean that in disrespect at all. It's just when it comes to academics and you think, like when I think about rigor, I don't necessarily just think about difficulty. Because if we're thinking about it, okay, let's pretend that there was a fire in my home and I've never practiced a fire plan. I haven't discussed that with my children. And in the middle of the fire, I'm yelling and screaming at them. You know, the alarms are going off. It's chaotic. There's smoke everywhere. And I'm trying to yell and tell my child from across the house how to escape from the fire and where to go and how to get out. Well, first of all, one, I've kind of failed in my job as mom as not preparing them. But in another aspect, they are not going to learn in that stressful situation like they will if we just walk to the mailbox and say, hey, if we ever have a fire, let me show you how you can kick out this. Let's go open the windows. I've done it just like that. Like it's a casual conversation of, hey guys, come here and let me show you how to open this window. And let's knock out this screen and let's walk to the driveway. You know, just those things, and have a meeting place. They learn from that way more than they're going to learn in the stress of the fire.
Right.
And so it's kind of the same situation where, you know, we throw them into this, quote, rigorous academic situation, and they feel like they're stressed in the fire. And we that's why I love master books, because, you know, people will come in and say, oh, well, I really think that, you know, math level 1 is more kindergarten. Well, some concepts, okay, maybe at the very beginning, and that's why it takes a slower approach, but it ends up in the same place. And the more gentle approach, it helps ease them into something. I mean, just like your picky eater, you know, you've got to ease that child into opening up and exploring new foods. It's not where I'm going to make this smorgasbord. If I threw out like 5 things on my child's plate that they haven't ever eaten before, or that smells funny, or the texture's funny, you guys, my children will walk away hungry. They've done it before. So, you know, you have to like make it appealing. You have to help them understand that this is an enjoyable process. And, you know, just like my little 5-year-old, I'm in here setting up and he comes and grabs his math book and says, oh, I didn't do my math today, you know, and he wants to open it and do it right here, right now. It's enjoyable for him. I don't
Right.
want him to be stressed, and I don't have to make him stressed right now. So why would I?
Yeah.
That's kind of my philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I like the analogy. All right, and then with math, again, a developmental approach to math, because usually when we think math, we think we're learning skill. What, how do you describe Math K? Because it really isn't about skill.
Right. So,
Well, about academic.
right. We talked last week, and I'll quickly go over scaffolding again, and how in scaffolding you're doing tons of different things, but it's basically that me as the teacher, I'm coming in to give support when it's needed, and then slowly moving off that support when it isn't needed anymore. And so, we've got critical thinking skills. First, we have the story. Scaffolding part of the story is we're making life situations relatable and connecting it to a math concept. And we are using their world where they can make a connection and understand, how does this apply? How does symmetry apply to, God's creation? And so that's what the story is helping them do. Plus, anytime you tell a story, it engages all of their senses and helps them to recall information. And so that's one of the reasons that Math Lessons for a Living Education is so successful. Angela is a fabulous storyteller, and she makes you feel like Charlie and Charlotte. And we do. We all know them in that family, and we feel a connection with them. That's why we're crying when we read her stories. And then we have the application. So what they've learned from that story and seeing Charlie and Charlotte do and model for them, then now they get to go and they get to do it and have more of a hands-on application. And yes, some of it's through play of, different measuring cups, and they're making inferences, whether you guys realize that or not. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, Matthew, that's my youngest. So I said, how many, if you've got a cup here, well, how many tablespoons can you put into that cup? Or if you've got a 2-cup, container, how many cups can go into that? And he may not know that this is a cup and this is a 2-cup container, but he's getting the difference of this one is larger and this one is smaller, and he's making those inferences. Whereas then today he's picking up something else that has nothing to do with anything we've done. It was actually an abacus, and he's lining things up and made each one on different, and which one's more mom, which one's less. Whereas those weren't really vocabulary words that he even knew before Math K.
Right.
So it's also a gentle introduction to math vocabulary.
Yes.
And just that language and getting their brains warmed up to think mathematically. And then the last thing was the critical thinking. In that, they're having to pay attention to detail. They're having to have visual discrimination. You guys, all of that is going to translate over. And I can take this and say that it'll even translate over into algebra, because they're being able to focus in on the detail, see the pattern or not see a pattern, and be able to notice those things later on, even all the way up through higher math.
Yeah. Something about all of Math Lessons with the reading is sometimes we approach it from, okay, this is an academic skill program, so I'm gonna learn 2 + 2, and the stories can almost be an inconvenience, and some kids are frustrated. Teaching them that there's more about this. There are clues in the story that we're looking for that are actually we're going to be learning, and it's not as if they don't enjoy the story, that's okay, but what clues are we finding, that what application are we taking away from it? Because there's really more to it than just it's more than just 2 + 2 = 4. You're really understanding its groups. There's, like you say, the languages of how to apply it. All of those things are tied back in. So
yeah, and I think a lot of people don't understand the story concept. Like, they're like, well, this is math. Why are we having a story concept? But the story is a teachable moment.
Yeah.
It's just like me talking about the fire. You're going to remember that story and be able to apply that later on. Or if I told you a story about something that happened to me as a child, I'm going to recall that when I'm out in life and need to apply that.
Yes.
I do the same thing with your teaching tips. I'm able to apply that in more areas of my life than just homeschool.
Right, right, right. Lauren asks, so would a 5-year-old starting K in September still do Simply K so that he learns life application, even though he knows his letters, sounds, numbers, and simple addition?
If she wants to do life skills, then yes, I would. There's several ways that I could adapt this. So if a child already knows their letters and their sounds, and they're ready for blending, so what I would do is I honestly would still do that ABC chart chant every single day. Here's why. It gives them that review that they constantly need for automaticity once they go into the reading and once they are having to recall quickly. And so I would still do that ABC chart with letters and sounds. And then, you can still do the rhymes. Some children don't get phonemic awareness development until later. Some children learn to read before they learn to rhyme. And so some adults maybe still struggle with rhyming. So it's one of those areas that you can still do. You might look at like the beginning lessons, and then I believe it's lesson 32 through 36 that has them just hearing the sounds at the beginning and end. And you could even add in some for maybe the middle as well. And then you can do your life skills and your Bible. So if you are even combining children, use the Bible from Simply K if you're doing stuff. The content there, I mean, I know I wrote it, but the content there is good. I mean, I don't feel like it needs things added to it. And then especially if you're adding a foundations phonics, the Bible there is great. So for those ages, what they are getting is really what they can handle and the amount that they can handle. So instead of doing the full-blown of letters and more section, I would just do like foundations phonics in that time. And you can do foundations throughout the entire year, doing it like 3 days a week. Somewhere I thought there was a schedule, but I don't know if we still have a schedule for doing foundations for half of a year. I mean, for a full year instead of half. Do you know?
I think there is one, although it's not really recommended because of the time frame.
Okay.
It's not something we encourage to draw it out because you're trying to help that connection.
Right.
So I know it was there, but I think, and it may still be available. Jessica may know where it would be, but yeah.
Okay. So if they wanted to do foundations, they could do it instead of just doing the letter section of this. But I would do those beginning lessons where they're hearing sounds and then mimicking you, and then the ending from like lessons 32 through 36. I wouldn't skip those before I went into foundations, even if they knew all of their letters and sounds.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think this is a good time too to be a student of your student. Watch what lights them up. Watch if you're doing activities and they just seem to come alive when they're bouncing and jumping and squeezing and whatever, you realize, oh, here's a kinesthetic learner that needs to be active while they're learning, and they're going to learn better than sitting in a chair, right? If they listen real well while you're reading a story and they can recall it back to you, okay, this student is more of an auditory learner, or do they need to say, let me see it, and they bully you into see the book? They need to have a visual connection to it. Like, this is just such a good time as a parent or a teacher and a parent, but to step in and say, how are they responding to this? What do they get bored of? What do they get excited by? How do we work with them? Because you're essentially now, in sales, one of the best things I ever learned early on was we would do fact finders. And with a fact finder, you're basically listening for what the needs are of the client that you're selling to. And once you understand their needs, then you can present the solution you have or not waste time. I think at this age, you're a fact finder. They're not just learning how to read in kindergarten, but you're also learning the foundations of, okay, the next steps. What is it showing me about this child?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think individuality, that can also be difficult because one size doesn't fit all. And as a younger parent, I would almost sometimes feel like I would ignore the uniqueness of the child and just think that they were a blank slate that we could mold any way we wanted to. But that I don't think that that's necessarily, we have genetic predispositions, you know. When you look at personality charts and stuff, there are ways that our kids do develop, and we can shape them a little bit. But my kids all have certain predispositions to certain, I can't think of any word with proclivities, but you know what I'm saying. some they like just have certain bends that you see, and the older they get, the more those come out. And I can remember from a young age, you know, like one of my sons who would just sit there and study his hand for hours. He's a mechanic, and he loves things like that. And now he just had a baby, and the baby is doing the same exact thing he did. And that's not something we trained. That was just from the moment he was born, he was doing that, and a 2-week-old is doing the same thing. So
Yeah,
it's kind of cool.
I have one. I remember the moment he came out, literally just like his eyes were open and he was looking around, taking in everything. And that's just how he's very observant. Like, he watches different things and notices different things. And he came out of the womb that way. And we do. I mean, each one of mine are unique and are different. And even like my niece, you know, like you said, a kinesthetic learner. My sister-in-law, she was getting her ready to go to kindergarten this fall. And she was like saying something to me about what she was struggling with. And I said, well, she doesn't like to sit still and learn. And she will tell her mom things like, well, I don't feel like it right now. And her mom wants her to come sit down and learn. And I get so tickled because it's just funny to me. But I was like, you know, instead of having her just try to find, you know, numbers on a worksheet, take Post-it notes, put them on the wall all around, and let her run and jump up really high and smack them and stuff like that. And I don't know if she took my advice and has done it yet, but I hope she did, because I know that my niece would love that. She'd be all on that, because that's how she learns.
Right.
And we have to look at, you know, their style, their personality, what makes them tick, you know, and that's the great thing about homeschooling that they can't get somewhere else, is I can tailor and scaffold to their personality and their learning style.
Yes.
And that's what makes it, you know, amazing, is because we can do that.
And sometimes we actually, I mean, not everybody, but a lot of times we tend to marry an opposite. And so then we approach our children, and our children are minis, opposites of us. And so it can be frustrating, because they are like the parts that we loved, but that challenge us in our children. And so, you know, that, like, just that awareness that this child may not be like me, may not like everything I like, and it's a good opportunity. Kim asked, should we practice oral narration of the math stories and Bible stories at this age?
Well, I do basic things. Like, even in the math K, there was like a story of Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. And one of the activities was that they tell you, because we've been talking about sequencing, so beginning, middle, and end. And I haven't discussed any of that with my 5-year-old really. And yesterday we did that activity, and I was blown away that he had no difficulty whatsoever. That doesn't mean all 5-year-olds will have no difficulty whatsoever, okay? I'm just saying, like, I was actually shocked by my own child, which happens a lot. But anyway, so I mean, there are little things like that, you know, and some of it, when they are showing you, or like you're saying, okay, we're going to roll this dice and then build this many blocks, it is a form of a hands-on type of narration. It's not just verbal narration, but it's them being able to say, okay, here is what I've learned. And so it's more of an active role of narration than just a verbal narration. So some of that is built in. And as far as like with the Bible stories in Simply K, I would just discuss it, you know, maybe say, do you remember what we learned about, who did we talk about today? Or, you know, what a rainbow is a promise, you know, or just things like that. What is a rainbow? You know, it's a promise from who, or something like that. Just little open-ended questions where they can kind of say something back to you about what they've taken away from it.
Okay.
But it's not, it's meant as a foundation, not meant as absorb everything I'm giving you.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Well, before we're kind of coming to the end of our time, do you have any parting thoughts for anybody who's considering Simply K or doing Simply K and Math K?
I would just have fun with it. You know, it's there. We often say that our curriculum is our tool, and sometimes I think that we just get caught up in doing the next thing that I'm told to do from my curriculum, instead of saying, you know what, my kid is not going to enjoy that activity. I'm either going to skip it, or hey, they would enjoy doing this better. I think I saw someone even do that with like a rainbow in stepping stones. They said, oh, you know, I knew that they don't like using whatever it was we said to use. And so they did a completely different activity, but still had the same concept. You know, so always think about that, like know your child. And if you don't feel confident and you need the scripted, then it's there. But if you feel a little bit more comfortable especially as you go and kind of get a rhythm, don't be afraid to deviate a little bit, or, you know, go off course just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, we've seen in the Moms of Master Books group, one of the things that I like is we really encourage constructive discussion, things that are building up and you know, whatnot. I absolutely love that somebody found the narration of the Bible stories wasn't working, and so they had the student build with Lego, and all of a sudden this new connection comes forward, and it helps a lot of other moms who are struggling in that same space to start using, you know, the Legos as that. And I know we had a student a while back who was not enjoying her work, and so she was brilliant at creating Lego movies, and she just did a fantastic job of narrating through a Lego movie. And you know, maybe that took a lot longer to kind of pause things and say, okay, go create a Lego movie, but that experience probably will make more connections, right? And it's worth going a little slower sometimes and doing, you know, fine tuning and that. So yeah, we can be creative and growth hack our children's education. I mean, don't be married to something that isn't work just simply because you don't want to give in. And that doesn't mean we just keep hopping from thing to thing, but it's kind of a being willing to try and experiment and even allowing our kids, would you agree with this? Even allowing our kids to know you're part of the experiment. Like, you're unique and wonderfully made, and I don't know what makes you tick all the way, and we're going to start this, and there may be other things. My son now, maybe we've gone to the extreme, but I have a son who will come to me and say, Dad, that's not my personality type. On the Enneagram, I'm this, and on the Briggs-Meyer, I'm this, and on the DISC, I'm this, and you keep expecting me to be like you, and you're this, and how is that going to work for me? Because that's not who I am. And so he understands that he's part of the experiment of learning who he is, what makes him tick, what his strengths are, what his weaknesses are. It's kind of fun. It's kind of scary. We gave him the logic course, and now that he's taken the logic course, I think he's arguing at a higher level than I'm capable of.
I was about to say, I think he is more closely aligned to you than he knows. He may say his personality isn't exactly, but that's really funny. It's like he's selling and spinning it to make it, you know, hey, that's not my personality, just because it's something he may not love. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that could be. But I think we can allow our kids to know that you know, learning is fun, and it doesn't all come the same way. And so with Simply K and Math K, these are tools that we've created to help people develop their children and make them still feel that I'm doing something. I have a plan to follow. And
Right.
and it's very intentional. It's based on scientific method that we're seeing with other cultures that are excelling in education. And we want children to have the best foundation so that when they do go into
grade 1, or they start to learn foundation phonics, or the math or whatever, that they're very well prepared for that journey. Not that you have to do a year of deschooling and counseling and all of the things that
Right,
go along with
right.
it.
Well, and like part of the heart behind this was to be able to bless the moms and hopefully relieve some of the stress on those moms who maybe have never taught kindergarten, or the mom who has 7 children and is trying to balance it all.
Yes.
To be able to give them something as a guide to say, oh, okay, we can do this, or even that their older student can pull and say, oh, okay, we're learning how to fold towels today, you know, in the shape of a rectangle. Come on, I'll help you and let me show you how.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to all be right here in front of the book. You know, learning doesn't always take place sitting at this table. And so I think to realize that and, you know, really understand that the heart of it is not, yes, it's to teach our children, and yes, you know, the biblical values to me is extremely important, but it's also to come in and like scaffolding our student is to also help the mother and hopefully, you know, be a blessing in their home. That's, you know, that's what I would love for it to be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you for joining me for a second week. And
You're welcome.
hopefully this was a blessing to those in the group. And if you have questions, feel free to ask. I know last time people asked some good questions, and Carrie, you were willing to kind of keep an eye on things and answer them. And so any questions, feel free to answer. And we will see you on Thursday, I believe. Yes, Thursday. All right, everybody. We'll talk to you later. Thank you.